We're doing it live, back with another Truth Seeking Thursday here on the Tinker Tribe channel. Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome, and I hope everybody had a wonderful and safe New Year, and everybody had a good time. But yeah, we're back at it for 2026. I'm Greg Dowd, and I'm here with Jay Young tonight. We're going to continue our conversation tonight about the future with AI and artificial general intelligence, the push towards artificial general intelligence, what that means for the workforce, and what we can do about it to find meaning in a future that's where we're pushing towards this technology. So, Jay, what's up, man? How have you been? How was your New Year? Did you have a good time?
Great. It was really good. I partied with some really good friends of mine last night, and as parties go, it was entertaining and not overwhelming. So it was a good combination, just to be with good friends. So it was really nice, and nothing was.
Nobody got too crazy.
Yeah, nobody got too crazy. And actually, there's two friends of mine who enlisted in the army. They were able to get home. One is in Benning, one is in Fort Drum, New York, and so it's nice to have them there. So it was really cool.
Oh, they're currently enlisted.
Yeah, they're young guys. One is around 20, the other's 22, I think. So and they're good guys, and I just appreciate what they're doing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Like I've been working myself like crazy lately, so at work, and so yesterday I think we talked in preparation for the show. I was like, man, I think I'm just gonna read a book. And I read part of that book, and then I was like up watching some stuff, a podcast, and I fell asleep even before the New Year, so I just like crashed, man.
When you described the book to me, just right before we got on the air just now, I was really glad to see someone's doing that. I don't know if you're interested in taking a 60 seconds to describe it, but it's very encouraging to see that the truth is finally starting to come out on this particular topic that you're looking at.
Oh yeah, the book is The COVID Code: My Life in the Thrill Kill Medical Cult by the author. The author is Zoe Smith, and she was a medical coder during the time of the COVID pandemic and the height of it, and or the scamdemic, the plandemic, however you want to refer to it as. But she goes through her perspective as a medical coder during that whole time, and it was a really, kind of a firsthand perspective of that. She's a whistleblower from the hospitals, from inside the hospitals during the whole event, and so yeah, I'm getting into it, and I mean, it kind of is a lot of stuff that I I knew, but it's like, when the whole thing kicked off at the part that I'm reading, it's like the no cases for any other stuff were getting treated. It was all COVID, and it was like, let's kick everybody else out, including people in the ICUs. And the hospitals were pretty much empty from what she was describing. And the hospitals were hurting for money, because during that time, they, you would think hospitals are have all this money, and they're pretty, rolling in the cash and everything, but they're actually running into the red by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And then they have to make sure that they get all their billing and all that stuff done from the medical coding and everything like that to get themselves back in the black. And so when this all popped off, they're already really hurting for money. And so there was the stuff that got basically incentivized, like the drugs and certain treatments during the whole COVID thing, got incentivized over alternative methods because they could get more money for those treatments, because of the way they were considered in the coding as experimental drugs and treatments. So yeah, reading through the book is pretty interesting so far, and want to get her on to chat about everything that was going on during that time.
This reminds me of um, there's that Soviet figure. I can't remember if it's Stalin, Lenin, said, "I care not who about the elections or who votes in elections. All I care about is who's counting the votes."
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of what you're talking about, and I guess what the author's bringing up is, you know, you can make things, if you're willing to be fraudulent, to say anything you want, and they're able to shape a certain narrative by basically just engaging in outright fraud, by deliberately miscoding how certain treatments have to happen, right? And we've seen this so many times in throughout history where there's just a deliberate miscoding of whatever. We're seeing this in Europe in regards to how crimes are either they're not recording pertinent information about certain people, or they're deliberately mischaracterizing in official police reports physical attributes of people in when crimes are committed in Europe. And I'm being very vague, obviously right now, because this is your channel, Greg, and I don't want anything to happen to your channel. And when this sort of thing happens over and over again, I think they have good intentions and they're trusting of the sources. Well, the color of the car is green, therefore the car, it was coded as green, therefore the car must have actually been green. And that's absolutely not the case. And I've heard so many stories where people in the hospitals were basically ordered to code things inaccurately or just outright fraudulently. That way they can shape a certain narrative, and then funds will flow in accordance with that. And so I really appreciate this person coming forward and talking about this. And I think we all heard the war stories in real time, but to have a singular person kind of bring us under one heading, that takes a lot of courage. And I really applaud this person's efforts. I hope you're able to chat with this person.
Yeah. Well, she's connected to some other guests that I've had on in the past. So yeah, we'll see if we can get her on for sure. We'll see. Starting off hot with King of the Earth 2149 to go ahead and get a question out here or a statement. To answer your thumbnail question is purely dependent on if they are seen as kinfolk or slaves. If we treat them as family, they will love us. Treat them as slaves, they will kill you. So yeah, that's the whole premise behind the show today is like, is AI going to empower us, or is it here to enslave us? And what kind of tools can we use in the whole AI realm that are currently existing? We have a bunch of kind of examples of some open source type tools with AI that are around right now. I think that's kind of going to be centering around our discussion. How can we use this technology to empower us currently?
Yeah.
And how far do you want to take it? That's another question. So I think where do we want to start with this, Jay? We maybe talk about the
could we have just a real quick recap of the last episode? Just very, very brief. And I apologize if our last episode was maybe a little apocalyptic and a bit of a Debbie Downer. I don't think we meant it to be that way. If anything, I think we're just trying to help people be vigilant, right? Just be very aware of where things are, where the trends are, and where they might go. I'm giving my personal apology on that right now. And I think also what was concomitant with that was the idea that when we lose our work, we lose our identity. And I think that something that's been around for millennia is the idea that a person is their job. I am a carpenter, I am a plumber, I am a developer. And that is their identity at that point, versus I do plumbing, I do carpentry, I do coding. And and there's, I don't think there's anything right or wrong on either side with an identity. I think, for those who are familiar with Ayn Rand, they understand the idea of creating value for, especially creating value for others, and that what separates us from all the other life forms, the other animals, is our ability to reason, and that shows up in our work. And so I think it's really easy for people maybe to be a little disheartened when they feel that something's being taken away from them. You're taking away my my ability to do plumbing. You're taking away my ability to do carpentry, right? And I use those because they're pretty easy. Everyone can kind of relate to that to some degree. And so I think that there's always the possibility that we might be a little bit of a doom and gloomer kind of attitude, and I think anyone can kind of get in that mode. And I think today's episode, Greg and I we spent a decent amount of time trying to put together something that hopefully has a little bit of an optimistic bent to it. and I'm being very upfront and honest. I'm optimistic right now. So we want to put together something that we hope that is first principles oriented, and then also action oriented. Things that average everyday person can actually implement in their own lives and make a difference. And they may not have the ability to change everything right now, let's say just in 2026 alone, but it's the start, it's the beginning. And I think that as more people become I'll say activated, they feel more empowered, and this is all new. We've never seen this sort of thing before. So the most that we can do is just work off of first principles and some history. So we're poking in the dark just as much as everyone else is. And so we're the only thing we could do is maybe just shine the flashlight just a couple feet in front of everyone and hope for the best. But I think that this audience is definitely oriented towards action, definitely oriented towards being empowered, and self-empowerment, and then also empowering those around us. And it's the reason why Greg and I do the show, and I think this is so important. So I hope that everyone kind of feels that sense of purpose from us.
Yeah, so that's the goal of this whole endeavor, is to leave you guys with some stuff that you can empower yourselves with, some knowledge that you can empower yourselves with in your life, and have some interesting discussions, and figure out, as we're moving into a future where there's some lots of questions like this. What does it mean to have, or what does meaningful work look like in the world of AI? Is it going to take everybody's jobs? What can you do about it? So I think we need to kind of understand, I guess, where we're at a little bit. Let's see. King of the Earth brought up this is kind of maybe part of where we're going is AI is level 1, AGI is level 2, ASI is level 3, and the ADI plus are past level 10. And I guess he's referring to artificial design intelligence when it comes to design.
I've never heard ADI before, so maybe you can help me understand what that is.
I will pull it up here because I had to go look it up as well. So artificial design intelligence, a technology levels artificial intelligence and machine learning to automate and enhance design processes across fields such as web design, graphic design, user interface, user experience design, and even architecture. According to the Brave AI, more speculative and societally focused interpretation of ADI is artificial disruptive intelligence, proposed in online discussions as a term to describe AI systems capable of replacing large classes of labor, such as developers or legal professionals, leading to significant economic and social disruption. This concept highlights the potential for AI to automate high-value jobs with profound implications for employment, taxation, and global dynamics. Thus, ADI encompasses a range of AI-related technologies, from automated design and data intelligence to hardware acceleration, societal disruption, each defined by its specific application domain. So,
I think
could have multiple interpretations, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that really fits in the quote unquote level of I'll say ordinal numbers, first, second, third levels, or anything like that. I think that AI, by its very nature, is always disruptive. So to call that out as it is level 10 or something like that, I'd say it's a little bit of a misnomer. And when we talk about the most abstracted and most general terminology, AI, AGI, ASI, that's kind of the current paradigm that we're aware of. It's always going to be disruptive in its own way. Talking a little bit about kind of going back to the last episode, I had a certain framing that I hope is helpful in terms of looking at the order in which AI will probably start having the greatest influence. And I defined it as, and I'm sure there are different ways of defining this, right? So this is not fixed and it's not written in stone. But the first things that are going to be probably taken over, and because it's the most easiest, and there's nothing that ties into the second law of thermodynamics, is any of the virtual things, any of the cyber and purely informational based sorts of tasks and jobs. So accounting, finance, project management, analyst positions, legal to some degree. These are things that are pure informational. A lot of the dev work we're starting to see, it's not 100%, but it's quickly moving past 50% in terms of the amount of coding that's being created. The second area or paradigm that's going to be probably taken over are the things that are pure physical with very little intelligence necessary for that job. So I'm not impugning people who do the job. I'm just saying for that job, it doesn't require a great deal of intelligence. And these are your highly repetitive tasks, like we see in a factory line where robots move things, they weld, things like that, or moving product in a warehouse depot, something like that. And it's the sort of thing that doesn't require a lot of custom movement and a lot of custom thinking. And then the final paradigm would be some sort of combination of those two things of intelligence and custom physical movement. So if you have plumbing, carpentry, surgery, things that are really not that repetitive, and they also require intelligence to do that sort of thing. And I really do put those three things together: plumbing, carpentry, and surgery. I put them all together because of that very fact. So those are probably the things that AI would take over at the last in the last paradigm. So I think that if we are able to kind of keep that in mind, that's the lens that I've been using to look at AI disrupting our work life.
Yeah. There's like the physical things that require you to have to be able to solve problems and be able to troubleshoot things. I guess like electricians, plumbers, carpenters, all those kind of jobs. A lot of the trades, repair, mechanical repair work, welding. Well, certain types of welding, I guess. Those kind of things, seem like they will be safe for a while.
Yeah.
And then you know, a lot of the, like we are talking about in preparation for the show, a lot of the stuff of like program, a lot of the desk work kind of stuff, um, it, you know, is on the chopping block. It very much seems like, as far as, you know, the rate that this stuff is coming out and what it can do currently, with these LLM models, um, and the way that it's accelerating. So
Yeah, so I think that there is the perceived problem, and this is something Greg and I were talking about. We've been trying to frame this up. There's the perceived problem, and I think it's reasonable that people feel that this is a perceived problem, or they feel that it's a problem, because it requires a massive change, not just in perception, but also in how we actually live our lives. And so the way we're trying to frame this is, the idea is there's no more work for me. You know, if I've always been a truck driver, then that's going to be taken away from me. How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to feed myself, right? And none of that, you know, my identity might just evaporate, you know, overnight. You know, and we take a look at how quickly some ubiquitous technologies can take over. You know, just take a look at the automobile. From the time that it was first introduced, I'll say under factory conditions, to the time where it probably replaced the common mode of transportation, is, let's say, 90% of the mode of transportation. It was a pretty short period of time. If I had to guess, it's probably less than 25 years. So by the time that Henry Ford came out with the Model T, I think it was, I think that was the first one that kind of really rolled out, and then Model A not long after that. And how long that took to take over horse and buggy as a primary form of transportation. It was a pretty short period of time. And we can kind of go back and look at pictures and see, you know, kind of get a basic view into that. So it's I think reasonable that people have that concern. And on top of that, there is the perceived problem of centralization of power by corporations, right? And we're seeing that more and more. I mean, just in the major stock indices, we have the major seven, right, out of the FANGs: Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. I'm trying to think. There's two more in there, I think, and these are mostly tech companies, right? So we have the S&P, out of the S&P 500, we have the S&P 7 and the S&P 493, and there's very little, you know, correlation between the two. The S&P 7 are carrying almost the entire S&P 500. So it's understandable that people are, you know, really concerned about this massive amount of centralization. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being concerned about that. I think the other thing we looked at, I mean, I just mentioned before, is what is my identity, right? I'm no longer the function. I'm no longer the function of truck driver. I'm no longer the function of carpentry. So what does the world look like when we start to strip away that sort of thing from our identity? You know, the example that we kind of came up with is the character of Cypher in the first Matrix movie. I think it's played by Joe Pantoliano. And he was in the Matrix. He knew that he had been ejected out of the Matrix, and that he knew the steak that he was eating was fake. But he's like, if this is ignorance, then it's bliss. I'll take it. And he was quite happy to not to have an identity, you know, as long as he was able to suffer the slings and arrows of pleasure and hedonism, you know. So for the Cypher character, being lied to was perfectly fine. And he said, you know, plug me back in, erase my memory, and make me something really important, like a senator. So for a person like that, you know, it's just kind of automatic defeatist attitude. And I think at some level that we all kind of identify with that at a visceral level, right? You're like, what a scumbag, right? He's willing to sell out everyone else, you know, just so he can have that position of importance. And he didn't have a sense of identity. And the name was was perfect. It was cipher, right? He was enigmatic, right, behind the scenes, and there was nothing there. It was all on the surface. So I think it's perfectly understandable that people would have that concern as well, you know. And then out of this, um, I think what Greg and I came up with is this massive bifurcation, this humongous social schism that would happen, right? The people who were like Cypher out of the Matrix, the people who are perfectly fine with just erase my memory, plug me back in, and I will suffer the slings and arrows of pleasure and hedonism. And then there are other people, and I would imagine a lot of people in this audience and the people we associate with, they're like, no, the truth matters. I need to bring value. It's not just the work. I need to know that I value as a human being, and that I'm having a positive impact on others. And whether we call it a schism, of left to right, in this direction, or schism, up and down, however you want to measure it. I don't know what that is, but I think we're going to see that, and we're slowly starting to see that now with a lot of people who are embracing AI, like really embracing it. They're giving themselves over. They're putting chips, in the wrists so they can get in and out of places. And then there are other people like, well, I'm not sure I can follow you. They're almost like Padme talking to Anakin and Mustafar, right? You're going down a path they can't follow. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing is just the beginnings of a split. And I'm not sure it's necessarily that Luddite kind of anti-technology bent. I think people are understandably really cautious. They're finally starting to understand the warnings that people like Glenn Beck were giving, 20 years ago. Like, hey, you need to examine this sort of thing. They're just finally starting to see it. So I can appreciate that people are really starting. They want to pull back the reins a little bit.
Well, I am one of those people that is very skeptical about the development of the technology, and I am very much want to ask the questions of like, just because we could, does that mean that we should? And and I think fundamentally, I can see it kind of coming down to like the whole centralized versus decentralized kind of idea,
Yeah.
where you have these huge companies developing AI and pushing it in a direction that is being used for all kinds of bad stuff. It's like being able to do facial recognition stuff and eroding our privacy more and more digital in the digital realm. This could be tied into a digital ID system, and then tracking Palantir, getting connected with all these different government databases. Palantir has already been used in Israel to do this. They had this Lavender AI, which was assigning people threat scores based on if they were assumed to be dissidents towards Israel, and so in the hands of these certain entities, it very much looks like they're using, all across the board, using it to erode privacy, take on more and more of a totalitarian type control system over humanity. And on the other hand, we talked about this. It's almost like now that this stuff exists, it's almost like Pandora's been let out of the box. It's open to everyone, really. And there is an opportunity there to leverage that technology on a more decentralized basis through some of the open source stuff and open source codes that are out there, so that it kind of takes it out of the hands of these larger entities that have specific purposes for it, and puts it in, and has the ability to put it into the individual's hand to increase their productivity and use it as a tool on their side. Now, what does that look like? In my conception, it looks probably like you running your own little server thing,
Yeah.
and having your own individualized open source AIs running on your own independent servers, and um, and then utilizing those for different efforts in the economy. And there's several examples that we talked about in preparation for the show that you could use your own individual AI system for, and being able to create more abundance in your life. And so yeah, while we're marching this one direction, I think if you completely cut yourself off from this technology, then um, then that is totally something that can be done. And I think it would be wise and prudent to not totally kneecap yourself to become too dependent on it for your thinking specifically, which is a trap that we could fall into. Is that now that we have access to this, then we're not so much using our own critical thinking, that we're kind of outsourcing some of that thinking to the artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And so in there, you have to be, you still have to be aware that, these AIs, they're, not to the point where they're like infallible and that they're not just going to spit you out something that's that you can totally trust. So you still need to, do your own dives into things and continue to keep that exercise. So I can see where it could go down. People could go down that path of outsourcing too much of their thinking to it, and it end up being a crutch for you. And but on the other end of that, being a tool to maximize your personal productivity as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think that if we were to look at the ethics associated with journalism, real journalism, not the garbage that we're seeing today, the ethics for real journalism is actually pretty good. It's always about trust but verify, dovrete no provete, right? And I think there's something to be said for that. And if they can't verify it, they don't put it out there, And I think that in some ways, if we as users of AI as a tool kind of apply that same level of ethics, then we could do well. If we had that healthy level of skepticism, then we could employ AI well. I think, and I guess it's kind of what you're getting at, Greg, is regards to when people just completely abdicate responsibility, right, and personal responsibility. And unfortunately, that's always been the case throughout human history. People are more than happy to abdicate personal responsibilities to others. It just happens to be the AI kind of shortens that timeline real quickly. I know you want to get into Alex, but I want to call out Michael Potter's comment. People are being naive if they don't understand the AI, current or near-term future, will displace thinking work. Androids will certainly be next for physical work, and I totally agree with you, Michael. It's and so full disclosure, Michael's a friend of mine. He's a really sharp guy. I won't say what industry he works in, but you don't go in that industry unless you got something on the ball. And I think that's spot on. It's coming. We can either be on the bus or under the bus.
I think this one is kind of interesting about Alex here. I saw a short vid the other day where ChatGPT told a guy he should do the hard thing and not use AI because it hands over power. LOL, ironic and scary. That was just all human content summarized, though. So, and there's all these stories of people turning their AIs into companions and stuff like that, and that can get kind of weird.
Well, we saw that movie. I don't know if we talked about this last episode, but the movie with Joaquin Phoenix, Her,
Yeah,
and
her.
Scarlett Johansson was the voice.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, we've never seen this before, so we don't know exactly how it's going to go. But in terms of, there is a section of the population that would be more than happy to do that sort of thing, And we've seen we are seeing instances, and I think you're calling this out, Greg, accurately, of people, getting the virtual companions, and they have a limit on the amount of memory they can hold. So the memory gets wiped, and they have to start over. And these people are going through really severe mourning cycles, in doing this. And I feel badly for them. I really do, because I think there's something missing in their lives.
Mm-hmm. You want to go to this other one? If you replace business by Michael Potter, if you want to replace a business workforce by AI, the business owners and leadership will endure and potentially benefit until, of course, AI takes on identity. At that point, humanity is in big trouble.
Yeah, I think it's a point. I think it's definitely possible. This is I think last year I saw someone, kind of a thought leader in the AI realm. It may have been even a guy from OpenAI, said something to the effect of, the first individual billionaire has already been born, in the sense that this person will create a company and they have no employees. They are the only employee, the only person, physical, tangible, IRL person in the company, and they will obtain, either $1 billion in actual wealth or $1 billion per year in revenue. That person's already been born. Now, we're going to see how the market, plays out. But I think that could happen. And fortunately or unfortunately, that's just one stage in this overall development, right? Where what could end up happening is that one person creates a multitude, or uses a multitude of LLMs, different AIs. All of them create different agents, and then with those, they're spawning other companies. So then, where's the legal line at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Who's ultimately responsible for what those companies are doing? Is it the LLMs and their respective agents, or is it the person who owns the company that owns the company that owns the company? That's a whole other legal issue that where I don't think many people have thought about that.
Yeah, and like the whole tax implications of all
Right.
this stuff too. It's like how you you replace your workforce with all these AIs. So what kind of little tax new schemes are going to be invented to attempt to get around some of that?
And
Or
I hate to
because
keep going on tangents, but real quickly, we
yeah,
saw this regards to when Obamacare was implemented. A lot of companies were tempted to cut their workforce, their employees, direct W-2 employees, and to convert them over to contractors. And basically, if I remember correctly, either there were regulations or there were court rulings that said, no, you can't do that. We know you're engaging in gamification. You're what's it called? Gaming the system, right? And that was their attempt to try to get around the minimum number of people where a company has to offer healthcare, right? It was something like 500 employees or something like that. And that could be the kind of thing that we see in regards to AI, right? What the legal ramifications of what is an employee at that point? Is it quote unquote fair if one person is controlling 3 different AIs, and they have all this revenue coming in? Are there legal ramifications for that? So I think that out of the a little bit of the apocalyptic viewpoint that may have been spurned from the last episode, and things that we're all starting to feel over the past 3 years, Greg and I really wanted to focus on opportunities. Opportunities for embracing change in a positive fashion. And many of you know that I have a little bit of a background in Bitcoin. I routinely promote it. I have my own Bitcoin Meetup group. And Bitcoin is decentralized money. And I call it the ultimate freedom accelerator because the fact that it's getting government out of the game, the money game, right? It's the separation of money and state. And I think that's the only way that we're really ever going to get true individual liberty uh, as a species. And so I'm all about the decentralized tools. You know, what do we need to do to have as many decentralized tools as possible? And that's partially to um, address the concerns, the legitimate concerns around an inordinate amount of centralized control by corporations, and and then also concurrently to enable individuals to have individual power. You know, when we've talked about megapolitics in the past, and megapolitics are basically any event, man-made or natural, which happens independent of government control. And when we look at megapolitical events, such as the gunpowder revolution or the Gutenberg press, what that always did is it pushed power back to where it belongs with the individual, right? So my mom, I think she weighs like 110 pounds. With a firearm, she's on equal standing with someone who's 210 pounds, right? And she's never going to go out hunting for people, but she can use it in defense. And I think that's so important. So that's, in some ways, that's a distributed technology, right? We don't need government to create firearms, nor do we need it to control firearm distribution. So we were, trying to think of different decentralized tools or distributed tools, right? Whatever you want to use. And some things we came up with are, and this is not a comprehensive list, so please don't take it as such, but operating systems, a lot of people are either on Mac, under the Apple ecology, or Windows under Microsoft ecology. And Linux, some of you know, I've been switching over from Windows to Linux. Open source software, every distribution, every quote unquote version of Linux is open source. You don't have to pay for it. You can download it. You can verify it, and you control that environment explicitly. No one will ever load software on your computer without your explicit permission, meaning a password. Another one is money, and you know how I feel about Bitcoin. I think it's the first true form of money that we've ever seen. Communications via, let's say, VPN or Nostr, which is basically the centralized version of Twitter. Rented virtual desktops via other servers. So we could go out and rent virtual space on someone else's servers, and it can be completely encrypted, completely virtualized, containerized, and no one else can see into it. And I think Greg talked about the idea of having our own servers. That would be perfectly acceptable, for not that much money. You can buy something that's pretty decent, and you control the entire environment, on your own. Rented virtual storage. So we've heard about Microsoft has their OneDrive, Google has Google Drive. If you don't like those, and understandably you wouldn't like them, there's Dropbox. That's a really common storage, and they've come a long way since I first started using them. They will integrate into these other operating systems: Windows, Mac OS, iOS, and then Linux. So they have apps that will directly integrate into that. So renting 2 terabytes of information or storage, it's only $120 per year. That's not bad to get it completely out of the hands of someone else. And then also something I think is important are open AI projects. There are channels on YouTube that actually focus on these open AI projects that no one controls. Sometimes you may call them open source. You may call them open weights. Whatever you want to use. The code and the weights, if you know anything about AI, they're completely open and transparent. And so, if Greg and I wanted to, we could rent a virtual desktop, get some virtual storage, and get an open AI project, load it in there. We could get 2, 3, 4 of these right here and run them. And it's not that expensive. I've done a little bit of research into the costs. It's not that bad. And Greg and I, we could start creating movies. We could start creating songs. We could start creating commercials. We could create entire epics, TV series on this entirely on our own. It may not be good, but we could do it, right? And that's I think that's very empowering, and it's also very encouraging because then we're not dependent upon others controlling this gateway. And we've seen this so many times before in the past century with Hollywood controls the gateway. You want to get in show business, you got to go to Hollywood, right? You got to go to LA, right? You want to go into finance, it's either New York or it's London, right? They are the gatekeepers of that right there. You want an OS, it's going to be Microsoft, it's going to be Apple. That's it. And they're both closed ecologies. So very slowly, all that's slipping away. Their powers is slowly evaporating. So I hope people find this to be encouraging, what Greg and I try to put together for you.
Alexander here says, optimistic way of looking at AI is acknowledging that there's too much to manage these days that each person can handle. So it's like we need this, just got to figure out how to harness it, which is, I think, kind of along the lines of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Is that, if you want to be an individual and you want to have, your small business and, be an entrepreneur of some kind, there's different ways that you could harness this to, maximize your productivity as the individual. And, like myself, I'm working a 9-to-5 and I've been using some AI tools like Canva to generate the thumbnails for the YouTube show. And it's AI tool to help with thumbnails. I've also got the Suno music app to help with like intro music, songs, and things like that. And so, those are a couple of the tools that I've just been implementing myself as a content creator and creating content that have, shortened the time span for me to be able to, I was creating content or, creating thumbnails that were really shitty, really bad looking. Using GIMP is a kind of a alternative to is a graphic design tool, kind of like Photoshop, open source graphic design tool, and just slogging my way through it, looking at YouTube videos and such, and then decided to just start using Canva to start creating thumbnails. And being able to do that and being able to get a thumbnail out a lot faster, has allowed me to do some of that kind of stuff. And then, the Suno app is kind of pretty wild, where you can input, just some prompts and then kind of give me a song in the style of, whoever artist, or the style of like Delta blues or like bluegrass or, any kind of thing. And it'll take your lyrics and kind of throw it into a song, and you can, create all kinds of different songs with it. So, those are a couple tools that I'm currently using that have, really pulled down the amount of time that I've had to spend doing certain things, and then, been able to create some nicer looking stuff as well. But yeah, I mean, there's all, if I were to go out and seek, I'm sure that there's some open source tools. There was one that I was looking at and I have downloaded, but I haven't got it spun up yet. But it's called Focus. It's like FOOOK or FOOOCUS, but it's one of these similar to like Midjourney or any of the graphics like kind of tools like the Canva AI and all these kind of pay for tools. But it's an open source image creator tool that you can put on your own machine and then use it instead of having to use these different companies. So there's a bunch of these different kind of open source tools that are available out there, and I think that's probably the direction to start moving in, is to like you know, take some of these companies' tools that they've developed and start finding some of the open source alternative tools to use to help with your productivity. Um, but yeah, I mean, it has been just on that personal level. And then we talked to Logan last week, who's working as a handyman and utilizing ChatGPT in his efforts to, you know, quote and bid customers, and kind of handle some of that side of the business of his little small business. So it's already, you know, being utilized by different people. I also have another buddy that he is using the AI in conjunction with like Unreal Engine
Mm.
to create kind of like cinematic movies and stuff, to bring like his sci-fi kind of concept into a like Hollywood production type movies scenario with, and you know, using some AI tools with that to basically become his own little studio at his house. So doesn't need any actors, doesn't need a, you know, a budget to um uh you know, pay for all the production. You know, he just has to, you know, utilize some of these different tools and kind of work them together in conjunction. It's still pretty laborious process. Talking to him about it is he has to iterate it a lot to be able to get, you know, what he's looking for.
Yep.
But it's come a long way from uh from where he just started working on it. But that's like you know, a few examples just from myself and the people I know currently using the stuff.
Yeah, look at how many people would probably be required. Who was it you said was doing creating, you know, a video production? A friend of yours?
Yeah, yeah, a friend of mine. Yeah,
So look at, just to do that, you know, in 5 years ago, that probably would have required, you know, anywhere from 5 to 50 people, right? Just a rough, I'm giving a rough, you know, range there. And you know, you
well,
have to have,
depending on how much of a budget you had.
yeah, exactly, right. So let's just say it's just, you know, if you're just pumping out commercials, right? Not that many people would be required, right? But you know, I think what you alluded to, if is it TV series, is it a movie, etc. You're literally talking about hundreds, of, sometimes thousands of individuals contributing to this effort. You know, just watch any movie. Look at the credits at the very end. Sometimes there are thousands of people who are identified, and there are people from literally all over the world. You know, some people from South Korea, other people from Taiwan, some people in India. It's just the amazing amount of coordination to bring all this together. And your friend is doing this on his own. Granted, as you said, it's a little laborious, some iterations to kind of get it where he wants it to go. But it's probably, and I don't mean to diminish his effort, but it's probably just a matter of like watching it, changing the prompt a little bit, and iterating a few times. You know, you know, a few years ago, that would require an inordinate amount of effort and budget to make even a small change. You know, so it's just, I just find it to be really encouraging to see that people are able to do this, and they're evaporating the gatekeeping activity of Hollywood. You know, and just it's great. I love it. I will say one of the things that I think is we're gonna see as a consequence of this movement, this transition away from the current paradigm, is an explosion of creativity. I bet you every single person in this audience has one idea for a show or a story or a book or a character or an epic TV series, whatever it is. They've got an idea, and if they just had some time to put it together and maybe even work with some other creative people, 2 or 3, 4 other creative people, to kind of get some focus around this. I bet you there are a few people in this audience who could come up with some pretty cool ideas. And if they had, you know, people either guiding them or someone providing some, keeping them in the guardrails, or a different perspective on how to shape that vision, they could probably come up with some really good work out there. So that's the one thing I see happening. And I think Alex or Michael talked about this. when you don't have to take care of the daily stuff, like I got to do invoicing, I got to do billing, I got to, wash the dishes, all this stuff. When that stuff goes by the wayside, and that can chew up half your time, right? Then that frees up the ability to do really creative work. So that's one area where I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, we talked about how it does have you could be utilizing it to kind of free up from some of the monotonous work of just like the monotonous type paperwork and things like that that need to be done in any kind of a business venture that you're going to be working on. Another one was in education. This is another example that I've found through one of the folks that I've run across in my travels and going to conferences is Jordan Page in the realm of education. Him and his wife developed an artificial using artificial intelligence in a homeschooling education, fireflyedu.org. And this is having a course builder basically to help homeschool parents develop a curriculum for your children, and it's utilizing their little artificial intelligence to help you develop different curriculums and stuff for homeschooling. So so there's a lot of opportunities out there, with this technology being out there to develop all kinds of different entrepreneurial activities and opportunities to solve problems out there right now.
Yeah, this is so. I'm really glad you brought this up. This is a huge, I'll say, it's a topic of great importance to me. It's a bit of a bugaboo. Is the current paradigm of education is you're going to have at let's say grade school and high school level, we have basically a 31 ratio of 30 students for one teacher, right? When you get into college, it may be 100 to 1, 200 to 1 students for one professor, right? But even then, that's for just your basic courses, English Lit, Physics 1, et cetera, chemistry. But I think when we get to the model, like what you just talked about with regards to Firefly, is we don't need 5,000 professors. We don't need 50,000 teachers. We need 2, 3, 4 teachers / professors, let's say for one subject. And each of them have their own instructor's flair, and people can sign up for the instructor that matches the mode of learning that they get best. Maybe visual learning, auditory learning, etc. Whatever that is. Maybe they'd like a more structured flow versus someone who likes a little bit more free form type of flow. You can sign up for what you want. And then we have ratios that are somewhere in the order of 10,000 to 1, 100,000 to 1 of students to professors or teacher, And at that point, when we have students who have questions, you can either ask in real time or you ask at the end. And then the professor can take those on individually or answer them in mass, or they have TAs, to help out with that. And at that point, so much of our current teaching paradigm is highly regional. You stay within your town, your county, your state, or your country, or even your hemisphere, right? How many people actually go to other countries to learn? How many people go to other continents to learn? It's not many. My mom, moved from Taiwan to the United States, to get her master's. That was a huge effort, back in the, I guess, late 60s. That was a huge effort and a huge risk on her part to do that. Not many people are actually willing to do that. And also, by the way, she had to learn a whole new language to do so. That's a lot of effort. What if we had people who were we had the top 3 people on the planet to teach Calculus 1, and you just pick the instructor that fits your style the best. Guess what we've done? We've freed up a whole bunch of other people to teach other subjects. Do we need 500 calculus professors? Probably not. Maybe 5, 1/100th of that. So, I love the model that Firefly is putting forward. I think it's great. We need more of that, and get away from this highly regionalized aspect of teaching. And that's a huge bugaboo of mine. And I'm um, I'm a little irritated it's not gone faster, but I am happy to see that we are making progress in it.
Yeah, it's there's also the example that one other example is that I've thought of is applying some of these AI tools for planning out like regenerative farming and kind of helping you manage your farm and
Yeah,
some activities on your farm. Like definitely, uh, there's a lot of planning when you're talking about how you want to do regenerative farming because you need to be moving your livestock around and you need to, plan out all those moves and when everything's going to be happening on the farm during the different seasons. And, I think, if you had some kind of like AI little helper guy that's helping you with the planning, strategic planning, and things like that. We could, utilize some of that to kind of help with the overall functioning of the farm.
yeah, yeah. It's a really good point. I really like that because farming is extremely regionalized, right? I don't care about a farm in Timbuktu. I care about the farm in Hampton Cove or Owens Crossroads, right? Where my parents and I bought a cow, you know. So I really like that. That's a very apt example right there.
Uh, I do need to take a bit of a bathroom break, so you had some videos that you wanted me to kind of queue up here.
Do you want to go do your thing and I will I you know me, I can prattle on and on for a while.
yeah, if you want
Yeah,
to do that, and then
I'll
I
do
can
it.
come back and we can
Yeah.
check that out. So I'll let you
So
vamp here for a minute.
I'm gonna wax on a little bit about Linux. And I apologize if I come off like a fanboy. I don't mean to. It's just I've never used Linux before. This has been a great journey. There's a good buddy of mine, Dave, who has been encouraging me to consider Linux for a while. So I really appreciate him, and he's been a great guide in this area and a couple of other areas of my life. And this has been it's been nice to see that there's that level of self empowerment. And I appreciate that anyone who would feel a little intimidated by going to a system like Linux, because people think, oh, it's all command prompts, right? You have to type all your commands in. It's changed a lot in the past, I'll say 30 years. And it looks a lot like Windows, but under the hood, it works very differently. My point with this is that we kind of have these two extremes. Is on the one end we have Windows and Mac OS, where these are highly um, constricted environments that are closed ecologies, and on the other end we have the entire Linux ecology, and there's different quote unquote versions or what they call distributions out there. And I don't think we don't have to go to the extremes, right? There are so many tools out there that allow people to use operating systems like Linux, and they can um, use these tools to get Windows like or a Mac OS like performance, and I appreciate that the overall market has started to recognize that Linux has become such an important tool, especially considering that if you take a look at all the Fortune 500 or S&P 500 companies and the servers that they use, which are publicly facing, they all use Linux. They do not use Windows. They don't use Mac OS, right? So there's been a general recognition by the market to see that Linux is really coming a long way. It has a really nice front end that's similar to Windows and Mac OS, and that there are tools out there that can kind of bridge the gap. So it's not like you're not going to be back in the Microsoft DOS days, right? MS DOS, where you have to do everything by command line prompt, command line interface, CLI. And so I think that's good. That's very encouraging. And there are so many videos out there on YouTube to help people kind of, get through the overall process. And so that's good. And I realize I'm focusing a lot on this, but I just want to kind of encourage people. You don't have to switch over to Linux if you don't want to. But
definitely switch over to Linux.
You don't have to, but you ought to. But it's an option, right? And for many of us, we're kind of sick of Microsoft's BS, especially when they cut off Windows 10 and they're forcing people towards Windows 11. And they have created massive honeypots for hackers because they're literally taking screenshots of your environments, and that's
a huge erosion of privacy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That is a true erosion of privacy, right? And Microsoft, is telling you, oh, we're not going to do anything with it. Oh, okay, then why'd you put it in there?
Yeah.
Come on, please.
Come on, man.
Come on, man. So yeah, I think that if people are willing to make a little bit of an adjustment and spend a little bit of time to learn, and you don't have to do it all at once, do a little bit at a time. If you're willing to embrace change, you can make small moves now, have huge payoffs in the future, and it really is that ancient Buddhist saying, life is dukkha, which is life is change, right? And people interpret it as life as pain. If you embrace it, it's life is development and growth. And if you don't embrace it, if you fight against it, it's life is suffering. And I think that's a very it's a guiding light for all of us. So Alex has a question here. What would a company gain by switching to Linux? Having full control and not needing to adopt updates, but aren't those updates good for security, et cetera? So that's a good question. And, this is a question a lot of people have. So what would a company gain by switching to Linux? So yeah, they control their environment entirely. Then when they get rid of all the bloatware and the spyware that Microsoft is putting on their machines, and by doing so, there's less chance of the operating system crashing. That's a huge issue. So when these companies, 99.9% uptime is not good enough. They need 99. They need Six Sigma of uptime. They need to know that these systems are going to work. So just getting rid of the bloatware, the spyware is huge. And also there's less necessity for what we call regression, in the sense that I know that if I put a piece of software on a Linux system, it's going to work. Versus you put it on Windows, you don't know if it's going to play nicely with others. Full control of the updates, that's really, really important. We've seen so many instances of Microsoft basically breaking entire computers because, and they give them the BSD, the blue screen of death, because there was an update and it didn't play nicely with the previous version. And it causes humongous problems. For an individual, it's not fun, but it's really not a big deal. You could always just get another computer. For these companies, these systems are the lifeblood of how they operate. So, having their systems down, let's put it this way. If Amazon lost the front end, they're sunk. How many millions of dollars would they lose per second? And they use Linux. As for the updates, are they good for security? Yes and no. As I said before, how you define security. If security is just a matter of viruses and malware, maybe not. If security is, I know the system's up and running all the time, 99.9999% of the time, that's security, then yeah, no. Having these updates is not a good thing, And also, considering that Microsoft puts stuff on your computer without your explicit permission, and they can screenshot without your permission, what you're doing, just anywhere on the desktop. So it could be your banking information that gets screenshotted every 3 or 4 seconds and put somewhere on your machine. That's a honeypot. That's a massive honeypot that they're doing, right? They're also keylogging. You know, if Microsoft does it, it's good. When a hacker does it, it's not good. It's bad. So keyloggers, you know, we would never allow a hacker to do that, but yet somehow we accept it. We would never allow a hacker to screenshot our financial information. You know, how much personal information do we keep on our desktops or phones, for that matter, right? And even if they can't access our bank information, they're building a profile about us. If you have a decent amount of money, you're a target. If you don't have much money in the bank, guess what? You're still a target, because that's a person who may say, oh, this person is desperate for money. We can exploit that, you know? And so, you know, let's put it this way. How many people complain about having to update in Linux and complain about lack of security? You don't see that very much. It's really, really rare. But you do look, search for Microsoft Windows update crashes, you'll get a lot of examples of that, you know. And this, you know, I realize I'm waxing poetic a little bit right here, but, and I'm giving you my bias, but this gets to the whole aspect of open source, right? When you have open source projects, the entire planet can audit this. And you know, Greg and I talked about this, actually creating a whole business around bounties, where you create systems. We actually created a whole business model around this, and just for funsies. Bounties, creating bounties. And I think some companies, organizations do this. If you find something wrong with our code, let us know. We'll pay you to find something wrong with our code. You know, Microsoft's not doing that. Their code's proprietary. Apple's not doing that. Their code is proprietary. You know, so, and I don't mean, I'm not trying to get after you, Alex. I know your question is good intentioned. I'm really trying to adjust those who don't understand this sort of thing. Because they're not familiar with it, right? They just don't know anything about it. So I appreciate you indulging me on this topic for a couple minutes.
You did have a video that you sent about Anthropic CEO questions the value of open source in AI development.
Yeah, this is good.
Would that be kind of along the lines of the discussion here?
Yeah, and by the way, I don't agree with this guy. That's the reason why I wanted to bring this up.
Okay.
I don't think he makes good points.
All right. Let's see. I believe it's this guy right here. Yep. Let's refresh and then.
Works the same way in AI that it has worked in other areas, primarily because with open source you can see the source code of the model. Here we can't see inside the model. It's often called open weights instead of open source, right, to kind of distinguish that. But a lot of the benefits, which is that many people can work on it, that it's kind of additive, it doesn't quite work in the same way. So I've actually always seen it as a red herring. When I see a new model come out, I don't care whether it's open source or not. Like if we talk about DeepSeek, I don't think it matters that DeepSeek is open source. I ask, is it a good model? Right. Is it better than us at the things that's the only thing that I care about. It actually doesn't matter either way, because ultimately you have to host it on the cloud. The people who host it on the cloud do inference. These are big models. They're hard to do inference on. And conversely, many of the things that you can do when you see the weights, we're increasingly offering on clouds, where you can fine tune the model. You can, we're even looking at ways to kind of, investigate the activations of the model as part of like an interpretability interface. We did some little things around steering last time. So I think it's the wrong axis to think in terms of. When I think about competition, I think about like which models are good at the tasks that we do. I think open source is actually a red herring.
But if it's free and cheap to run,
it's not free. You have to run it on inference, and someone has to make it fast on inference. I don't think open source works.
Now, what is he talking about? What is inference? Is he?
So, full disclosure, I'm not a developer. I don't work as an AI professional. But so I think what that means is that a person can run their they can create a virtual desktop, load an AI app or AI model, I should say, on there, and then run it on there, right? Where when you're engaging with an AI, especially an LLM, it's making inferences, right? You know, make a video for me that shows a puppy walking through a forest, right? And it can kind of put all that together. So I say this with no bias against the CEO of Anthropic, but I don't think he's characterizing it well. You know, there's a channel. I'll see if I can find it for you. But there's a channel on YouTube. I'd say like at least once a week, he's showcasing 2 or 3 open AI projects, right, or open weights, and these are typically very specialized. There's one that's good at movie creation production. Another's good for image creation. Another's good for songs. Another's good for helping people, let's say, surfing the web, and it's just so many different applications. And I think that any reasonable person could go out and spin up their own instance, with some instruction and a little trial and error, and try these different things out. And the ones that are specialized in image creation, video production, etc. And if they don't like it, because it's open source, it didn't cost them anything. In terms of, you don't have to pay for it. You can just load it up, right? And so the ability for people to do that, it is free in the sense that you don't have to pay for that model. You don't have to pay for that LLM. There is a cost in the sense that you have to spin up and pay for a virtual desktop that has that in there. So I think he was being a little unfairly biased there.
So I'm guessing, so it's like this is from IBM's website. AI inference starts by training an AI model on a large data set with decision-making algorithms. AI models consist of decision-making algorithms that are trained on neural networks. Large language models that are constructed like a human brain. For an example, an AI model that is designed for facial recognition might be trained on millions of images of the human face. Eventually, it learns to accurately identify features like eye color, nose shape, and hair color. And then it can use them to recognize an individual in an image. Process of applying what the AI model learned through machine learning to decide, predict, or conclude from data. So I'm guessing that kind of falls into he's saying they still need inference, so they still need access to more data, I guess, is what he's implying.
So I think that there's the aspect of, so if we talk about AI, there's the aspect of training the AI, right? And that's in terms of what consumes the most amount of power, like actual physical electrical power. That's probably the one part that is the most intensive. Obviously, we have these huge data centers, and they do consume a lot of power because they have to have so many people who have to entertain all these requests, right? To feed all these people coming in. But in terms of actually getting the AI, the LLM trained up, so all the weights in your neural net are switched to the right values, the best values, optimized values. That's most intensive. So that's, I appreciate you doing that search there. So that's probably there's the training of the AI, so it can just bring in an inordinate amount of information, and then as I said before, it's the creation of the patterns, right? So it can recognize here's the difference between a cat and a dog. Yes, they're both quadrupeds. They both have tails. They both have noses, but it can tell the difference between the two. And it can both physically and, let's say, auditorily, it can tell the difference there. So yeah, yes, he's right in that sense, but a lot of these OpenAI projects, they already come pre-trained. You don't have to sit there and feed it you don't have to go through this massive cycle, because typically to train an LLM, I think it's somewhere on the order of hundreds of millions of dollars to go through, a full training cycle. That's a lot. People aren't going to do that on their own. They're just going to take whatever the open AI LLM that's out there, put it on their desktop, their virtual desktop, and just run that. And typically for the average person, it's probably pretty decent.
Yeah. Yeah. So, here's another video that you sent. It might be kind of leading into. Let's see. Is this one about talking about merge with AI or become obsolete? Is that maybe one that
Yeah.
might be interesting for discussion here? You can pull that one up. Let's see. All right, let's check this one out.
Of what happens in the long run. How do you achieve a long run equilibrium? And I think that there is an answer as well. And I don't like this answer, but it needs to be considered. In the long run, you might say, okay, so if you have a world where powerful AIs exist, in the short run, you could say, okay, you have universal high income and we're all doing well. But we know that, what do the Buddhists say? Change is the only constant. And so things change. And there is some kind of government political structure thing, and it changes because these things have a shelf life. Some new government thing comes up and it functions, and then after some time it stops. That's something that you see happening all the time. And so I think that for the long run equilibrium, one approach, you could say, okay, so maybe every person will have an AI that will do their bidding, and that's good. And if that could be maintained indefinitely, that's true. But the downside with that is, okay, so then the AI goes and earns money for the person and, advocates for their needs in like the political sphere, and maybe then writes a little report saying, okay, here's what I've done, here's the situation. And the person says, great, keep it up. But the person is no longer a participant. And then you can say that's a precarious place to be in. But I'm going to preface by saying, I don't like this solution, but it is a solution. And the solution is if people become part AI with some kind of Neuralink plus. Because what will happen as a result is that now the AI understands something and we understand it too. Because now the understanding is transmitted wholesale. So now if the AI is in some situation, it's like you are involved in that situation yourself fully. And I think this is the answer to the equilibrium. And then there is the question.
I don't agree. Yeah, that's getting into that's beyond where I would want to go with it for sure.
So I think this is starting to get into the bifurcation, right? The great cyber schism, if you will.
Yeah. Right. Because once that occurs, in the merging with the AI, then there's really no going back at that point. What does it mean to be a human being after that?
Right.
Right. It does it end up being a trap, as well. And in my opinion, yeah, because if there's a route in there, I mean, at what point are your thoughts your own, or are they part of this neural network of some kind?
Well, it gets back to that that RoboCop clip. I don't know if we played it for the previous in the previous episode, but it's where Kinnaman is in the RoboCop reboot, and there's the whole debate around who's actually when Robo's going through the CQB course, and when he's making the decision, he's running slower and less decisiveness and accuracy versus when the AI takes over and fools Robo, or I should say Murphy, Officer Murphy, into thinking the decisions are his, right? He's able to go through the CQB course very quickly with high levels of accuracy, high levels of decisiveness. And, and there's the whole aspect of free will, right? Who's actually running the CQB course at that point, you know. Alexander Chapman says, that's the point where I'm going to check if the Amish are accepting applications. There you go. Exactly. And
Yeah.
I don't think you're alone.
Right.
In your thinking there.
Yeah. I'm definitely not going that far with it.
Well, let me put a different different facet to this right here. So, you know, I as a lover of individual liberty will respect anyone who doesn't want to do that, right? And you have to make that choice for yourself, and we need to respect that, all of us. But then there's another aspect of this. There's a competitive part of this where, you know, if I have 100 people, 30 people engage AI and actually start integrating with it, and 70 people don't. You know, those 30 people will be able to outcompete the 70 people. It's my speculation, by the way. Please don't hammer me. My speculation. Those 30 people are going to be able to outcompete the 70 people, you know, orders of magnitude greater. You know, because of their ability to magnify their efforts and reduce the amount of, I'm going to call it administrative overhead in regards to the things they have to do to run their lives, right? Paying bills, eating, laundry, all that stuff. All that stuff goes by the wayside. And on top of that, their ability to learn, and Ilya talked about this in the video, their ability to learn not only data and information, but also knowledge and wisdom will be increased manyfold. Ray Kurzweil talks about this in his book, The Singularity is Near, where people, if someone needs to do a task, whatever the task is, and it's intensive, they will be able to go out to the open market and rent, you know, server space, store space that will increase their capabilities by, you know, several orders of magnitude, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times for a short period of time, do the work, and then you know, they let it go. They let those resources go. So from a free market point of view, there's going to be an inordinate amount of competition, and there's going to be an inordinate amount of external pressure, exogenous pressure to engage in that integration. You know, so I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's about trade-offs. You know, and I think that those who don't choose it are going to have a really difficult time competing.
It does kind of remind me. Well, I mean, there's so many of these science fictions that kind of show that you know, there is this kind of bifurcation where there are people that go in this one direction. I think I mentioned Zardos as an example of that, where I think the people that went in that direction, they were kind of held captive in this kind of like, they could live forever and keep like copying their consciousness into different bodies and stuff like that. But then at that point, it's like, okay, your life can just turn into just total complete hedonism, I guess, because of the fact that you can outcompete everything. Like, you've got really no threats or anything like that. And then it comes down to the whole question of what it means to be a human being, right? Because it's like, without some kind of struggle, without some kind of thing that gives you meaning, pushing forward, and you know, learning lessons, making mistakes, like you know, I feel like that's what grows you as an individual and grows your spirit, and some of the esoteric or occulted people talk about how most people are the undead or the unbegun, and they're just walking through life, not questioning, not growing as an individual, like kind of stagnating. And that's really the, you know, the action in this lifetime is to grow and to keep challenging yourself and to keep learning and to learn lessons from life. So if you have an almost omniscience hooked into this grid of collective intelligence, at what point do you lose that struggle? Like it no longer becomes a struggle to you know uh, to have life. And
What's the common term? NPC, non-player characters.
yeah,
Just NPCs are walking around all over the place.
yeah, that could be another another term for it.
Could we argue that? Could we use the same situation or argue the exact opposite? That those who are integrating or who integrate AI into themselves in some level, some way, shape, or form, that they become empowered, that they have the ability to engage in an inordinate amount of learning and creativity and efficacy because they don't have to deal with a lot of the day-to-day tasks and drudgery. Could we argue the opposite?
You could argue the opposite, but it depends on who's got control of that system. Like, what are you integrating into yourself? I mean, who has like, and from the entire history of humanity, let's look at that. And the folks that typically have the asymmetric control over technology are not the greatest people in the world with the best intentions.
So let me answer the specific question. What am I going to integrate? I'm going to integrate the Linux version of Neuralink. The one where I can see the code, that the code is completely open source and has been audited thousands of times by tens of thousands of people, and where we can see that there is no malicious code in there, right? And not only that, I'm not downloading the binary file. I'm downloading the open source code and I'm compiling it on my own, because that's what a lot of people do. They don't even trust the binary code. They have to download the open source code and they compile it on their own just to ensure that they're actually getting the real deal. That's how important it is. And by the way, I highly respect that. That's what I would be integrating in my life. Am I going to integrate anything from Tesla? No way. Same thing with Apple, Netflix, Facebook, with Windows. No, absolutely not. I will never do that.
Your tasks are now hijacked by Tesla, so that
you exactly
earn enough credits to keep your subscription service of life going.
Yeah, right. If you want to use your prefrontal cortex, it's $599 per month.
That's where I see it going. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would choose not to integrate that, and I guarantee you, there's going to be open source efforts out there, that would give the individuals power to control their own ecology, their own virtual ecology, if you will.
There are arguments to be made there, because humans, I believe, are programmable. We're all programmable, right? Like,
yep.
The media that you watch, the data that you consume, the books that you read.
Well, we just saw this in the China flu, right? From 2020 until today, it was a lot of it was a massive social engineering experiment. I think that's one of the best and most recent example of proving what you just said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're programmable to without any augmentation, but augmentation is like programming on steroids at that point, I would think, because now you have something that's digital is there's always a threat of hackability at that point too. So yeah, it's a whole nother realm when we're going down that rabbit hole.
Well, that's why I very specifically call out Linux, because with Linux, no software can be implemented, no updates can be implemented without explicit password you know, input of the individual. You know, that's another reason why people love Linux so much. No software can be put in there without explicit permission.
Other than, I guess, physically, I guess having physical access, maybe you might be able to gain access. It depends on the hardware too, I believe. Like, you know, who made the hardware, and I can't remember. It was one of the podcasts I was listening to where they were talking. I think it was maybe Bill Benny was a former NSA guy that was talking about how there is nothing that is not hackable because most of the hardware has some kind of way that you can get into it, depending on who you are. Like,
sure. Well, so if I were gonna approach this from a first principles point of view, and I'm gonna design this sort of thing, I would require that every time there is to be some sort of software implementation or upgrade or you know whatever, that you know we have to do 2 or 3 things virtually and 2 or 3 things physically, right? So when we see, you remember Data, Lieutenant Commander Data from Star Trek, right? And he had this little spot right over his right kidney, I think it was, where if you press in there, you hit a certain button, you turn your hand this way, right? And we could say the same thing. You know, you have to touch, you know, your right pinky and your left nostril, right, and your chin at the same time. It's like Control Alt Delete, right? And unless those 3 things are activated, it doesn't matter what you do virtually. The software is not implemented, right? So you know, you could have gates in there, you know, for this. But it gets back to the whole concept of competition, right? Is because of forcing functions, right? This competition that's out there, and we're all in competition, you know, whether we want to admit it or not. You know, there is no safe solution here. There are no solutions. If I could quote Thomas Sowell, there are no solutions. They're just trade-offs. You know, if someone wants to stay where they are and not implement AI, I respect that, wholeheartedly respect that. That's fine. Just realize that person is not going to be competitive anymore. You know, and now I'm a little biased because, you know, I worked as a senior project manager and senior business analyst. My job was changed because I was on several what they call ERP projects. Alex knows about these, and I implement systems like Oracle, SAP, and Epicor. And the whole point of this is to get a company off their old ecology and into a new ecology, and it was to get rid of the old way of doing things, the old, antiquated, horribly spaghettified processes, and getting these clean virtual environments. And there's risk on both sides. They're risking if they stay, and they're risking if they go over, right? And then, you know, from a first principles point of view, it's always like, well, we're going to manage the risk, you know, and we're gonna make those risks so small and so well defined that we have extremely high levels of success to flip over, you know. So there's risk on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I can see at one point like that the taking yourself outside of the realm of I guess the game that we're playing here.
Yeah.
And becoming at a certain point, like bowing out, then you're definitely have a asymmetric advantage of technology versus the other people. But I guess it's you know, what's the cost, and is the juice worth the squeeze to you?
Right.
And I think, you know, for me, ultimately, I would never go that far with it, but I can see where some of these tools can help you get more autonomy in the world and help to, you know, become more productive, and also kind of maybe level the playing field a little bit as far as that asymmetric advantage in technology is concerned right now. But but yeah, I mean that's where it's going ultimately. Just like you're saying, it's going to come down to that choice, really, and that's where really the bifurcation is going to take hold. And I can see as long as like the people that integrate with it don't want to totally wipe out the people that decide not to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you. 100%.
And that's where it's going to get a little dicey. I think if it goes that far, then it, and I mean, look at the history of humanity. It has been a competition of who has this asymmetric advantage in technology. Typically, comes and wipes out the rest of the people. So, it has happened throughout our human history. The ones that had the better military technology, the better strategies, typically took over the people that were lacking that specific technology or way to defend themselves against something. I can think of like the story of how when the Spanish came over and to the Americas, and the natives really didn't have a concept of these ships coming over and the armor and all the Spanish, and so they really were unaware of how to perceive the Spanish as a threat or if they were friendly.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of one of those like that could be a very high likelihood in the future where at some point it's the people that have this augmentation, do they see the rest of humanity and kind of make them the other and decide, well, we are your rightful rulers because you guys are too damn stupid to keep up with us.
If I remember correctly, I always confused the two. There was Pizarro and Cortez, but in that group you're talking about, they only brought over 200 individuals. It was horses, armor, and lance. And those 200, I'm going to call them soldiers for lack of a better term. Those 200 soldiers were able to wipe out an entire empire.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd heard this mentioned from Michael Yon. He referenced the book, A Song of the Dodo, and then he told that story about the Spanish coming to the Native Americans.
I think this book, 100 Decisive Battles, covers that. So it was a fascinating story.
Oh,
and you're right. They had the indigenous people had no ability to interpret, what was about to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So don't terminate me, bro. Don't be don't turn into a Terminator, dude.
I'm a benevolent dictator. Should we talk a little bit about other solutions? I think you had some really good some specific examples.
Yeah. One other thing that we're throwing back and forth was a small 3D printing business, like using AI to kind of, you could have like a customer service representative AI that would, ask you what your designing requirements are and what kind of, what kind of design you were looking for, and then, use that to queue up your 3D printers. Like if you had, you could spin up a website, an Etsy store or something like that, and, have the interface just be driven by, little AI that, you had that could help you facilitate orders and things like that. And, I could see that as, small scale manufacturing of different parts, components, things like that. Because now you have 3D printers that you can do multiple filaments of, you can have different types of filaments in there loaded up, and then that technology has come a long way since when I was playing around with it. Started to play around with it in like, I don't know, 2017, something like that. And it was very rudimentary at that point. And now it's all auto bed leveling. There's, camera sensors, there's enclosures on these things. They're relatively inexpensive compared to what the cost was in the beginning. So it's becoming, pretty, that technology is becoming more democratized, so that, and it's becoming easier to use really as well. So, if you have a good handle on it now, of being able to utilize that, you could totally spin up probably a little 3D printing business.
Yeah.
And, you just need like a web interface and, a payment gateway, and you can start, throwing out designs and starting to just print on the fly.
Yeah.
With some of these things.
What's that platform? Thingiverse? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, Thingiverse is one of them that it has a huge database of people's submitted designs, and that it's I guess open to download, and you can print out by for your own personal use, just to play around with on your 3D printer. And they're not licensed for you to like go make money with them.
Okay.
So you're not like open to just grab the files and then just use them to build a business out of it. You would have to design your own files and to do that, to sell them. So yeah. So that's what I was saying. If you had like a library of designs or something like that you had that you had created, and then you had some AI that helped you with some designs and stuff like that, that could be a potential business for. And I could see that growing as people, start to build their own little databases, I guess, of different designs and even reverse engineering parts. You can do that with probably an iPhone now because of their scanning capabilities, because they have stereo. Their cameras have like two cameras in them, so you could do like stereo scanning with these phones now. So you could even reverse engineer some components and then print them out as well with some minimal equipment now in software.
Yeah. I think that's a great business idea, I should say. I think you have the right perspective, is if they have an AI to help them with kind of the administrative aspect of it, right, is taking care of order taking, accounts payable, accounts receivables, just your basic accounting functions, and then helping them with order management, pick, pack, and ship, all that stuff, and then humans kind of in charge with, I'm going to say this very broadly, sales, marketing, understand what people want, what type of products people want, because people are typically, they really excel at creativity, right? So they should be using their strengths. And, the AIs would kind of be your COO, right? Chief of operations, right? And then your humans would be your CMOs, chief marketing officers, right? To find out what the market really wants. And obviously your CEO as well. So I think that's a really cool idea. I could definitely see people specialize in that. I wish I had saved the video, but there's a video on YouTube, or several videos, where a rocket company designed I think it's called a spike engine. It's a rocket engine made purely from copper. It's 3D printed from copper, and it runs. It is legit rocket engine, and it was designed entirely by AI. 3D printed, like what you're talking about, and they're still testing a few things, but it's a legit business, and it is really cool. And now, granted, that's kind of specialized, right? But I could see what you're talking about, Greg, in regards to it could be a whole slew of different things, products that I need around my house, and I don't want to buy that printer, but I need something that's made out of stainless steel. I need something made out of copper. I need something made out of aluminum. I don't want to buy the 3D printer, and I don't want to buy the powder metal, right, for that. And I think that's definitely something that's doable. And whether it be highly regionalized, like it's in my county, or it's in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I think you described it pretty accurately. You put your order in, and 5 days later it's at my house. Maybe I need a replacement rim for my car because I dented my rims, for my vehicle. Cool. There you go.
Yeah, I actually have that video reference I could pull up from this guy on YouTube. I think he worked with him. His YouTube channel is in Texas, and he worked with this company.
Yeah.
And they just iterated the design a bunch of times in their AI to come up with like the most superior design. And I think they're using like a centering process, 3D printing these things. But yeah, I think this is
propellant as it travels through the nozzle, and we increase the residence time, which should increase the likelihood of combustion. So it increases the combustion efficiency.
The engine didn't get destroyed, but they had to shorten the tank.
Yeah. Anyway, they designed that little rocket nozzle and everything with AI,
and it has no moving parts.
Yeah,
that's the really cool part. And inside the combustion chamber, I think there's a spike. Hence the reason why it's called a spike engine or something like that. And you would think that there's no way you could do that. Like, how do you print with something that's kind of free floating like that? And the AI, figured it out. Real quick humorous note: you'll notice that the flame coming out is green. That's because part of the fuel is mixing with the inside surface of the copper, and it's literally burning off some of the copper on there. Hence the green flame coming out of there. So, but that's all part of the iterative cycle, right? Of design and redesign.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff's absolutely fascinating to me. Greg and I were talking when we were putting together show notes. I said, what would it be like if every house, like most houses, have a utility room or something equivalent where you have your central heating, maybe central AC, or you have a oil heater, right? You have some sort of utilities in there. And what if there were a section of the house that dedicated for 3D printing? And it didn't have to be crazy stuff, not like the spike engine that we saw. But your common items. What if you just had something for cooking items, right? Or you wanted a new case for your phone. You could print these sorts of things. And there's a huge difference.
Yeah, it's a lot more. It's a lot more accessible now. Like, if you have little experience with design and these machine code, G code, or whatever, a lot of it is done from the machine has probably a corresponding slicing software that creates the machine code for you, and you just like go find a file on like Thingiverse, and then you can print it out yourself. And everything has like automatic functioning on how it levels the bed, how it grabs the material and things like that. So, you might have to learn a few things, but in comparison to maybe needing to understand a little bit about materials and everything like that, it's become a lot more plug and play for a lot of people to just grab a 3D printer and just get started printing all kinds of stuff. So
For those who aren't familiar with the area where we live, near Huntsville, there's a great store called Gigaparts, and they have kind of the local place for they're the high end Radio Shack, if you will. It's a huge store, so I go there for ham radio equipment. Greg, I don't know if you've gone there for 3D printing equipment.
I've gone there for like streaming stuff. Yeah.
There you go. And what I love about that place is they actually have courses you can take on a really wide variety of topics: photography, astronomy. They sell telescopes over there, and they have classes on 3D printing. And I just think that's just so cool that you don't have to be a PhD, you don't have to be a design engineer to get into this sort of thing. You can literally buy something COTS commercial off the shelf, and then go take it right into your class, learn about 3D printing in general, and then maybe stay after. And whoever's running the class, they'll probably sit with you and help you understand how to use your specific piece of gear. And that's how ubiquitous this has come. It's a retail store is offering 3D printing, and you can make real parts. And now, granted, it's I forget what's the type of plastic. Is it ABS that's typically used?
The most user-friendly, beginner-friendly stuff is like PLA.
Okay, PLA. So yeah, it's mostly some sort of polymer that you're using. But we saw in the video, they're using sintering processes for metals. They had Inconel, which is nickel-based. Nickel is a very hard material. When I say hard, I mean mechanically hard. And they were able to create this spike engine using Inconel. That's an amazing accomplishment, and there's no machining on that.
Yeah, the metal 3D printing has come quite a long way, and I will definitely say for like the plastics and 3D printing, like for the lower temperature plastics like the PLA, and once you get into like some of the more higher temperature ones like the nylon stuff and the ABS and stuff like that, it gets a little bit more technical, but a lot of them are coming mostly set up to be able to handle some of the higher temperature plastics and things like that right out of the bat, like with the lower cost ones that are out on the market right now, like they even have those capabilities. So yeah, it's like to get higher strength plastic components and stuff like that. I think that like we're talking about for like replacement parts for reverse engineering, and you have like a handle on your door that breaks or something like that.
Yeah.
Potentially, reverse engineer that and print out a pretty structural component using some of these higher temperature plastics now.
Yep.
So
what are some of the other examples you wanted to get into for other businesses or anything like that?
Nothing other on the list that I had. There was
we covered before, but you talked a little bit about regenerative farming, and I think that's a great idea. Your friend is into video production, right? And that's something anyone can do. You don't have to be at a farm, right? You can literally be in Phuket in Bangkok or Thailand, I should say, and you're doing video production, or you could be completely remote and doing that sort of thing. I think that's great. You talk about Firefly EDU. Someone saw a need. They saw this market need, a niche, and they're filling it. And we saw, it was about a decade ago, Khan Academy came out, maybe 10, 12 years ago. And this gentleman has, I don't know if he does it just by himself. He may have a team that's with him, but they have literally hundreds, if not thousands of videos. Just talk about the basics, calculus, personal finance, money, government, civics, things like that. And he just saw a need. He just started making videos, and he has a huge following on YouTube. And obviously he's not going to get into every single aspect of finance or accounting or things like that, but he has the basics. And I know so many people are like, yeah, I took a course in whatever, I didn't understand it, but then I went to Khan Academy and this guy made it so accessible, kind of explain it in common sense terms, like, oh, okay, now I get it. Then they can go on to discuss, or learn about other aspects, more technical aspects, and obviously if the guy were not good, he wouldn't have survived. He must be doing something right in terms of connecting with people and helping them kind of get over the hump. And that's the sort of thing I think is going to be great to see. There was an aspect of something that Greg and I came up with. We call it "Be patient but hurry up," and it was the idea that these exponential curves are coming. And when we go back into the 5,000-year arc of history, these movements in technology, they look linear, right? It may take 100 years for something to happen. To go from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, that takes, could be dozens, if not centuries of years to come along. And but in reality, these are exponential curves. And Ray Kurzweil talks about, it's actually, when it comes to technology, it's actually double exponential. And normally on an exponential curve, the time to double stays the same. So to go from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, it's always the same amount of time. With a double exponential, the amount of time it takes to double is actually decreasing. So if your doubling time is 20 years, the next cycle it may be 19 years. The next cycle it may be 18 years for it to double. So your doubling times are shrinking and shrinking. This is a really good website. It gets into a lot of what Ray Kurzweil talks about in his book, The Singularity is Near. And just for context, can you go back to that graph, Greg?
This one right here?
Yeah, right there. So, yep, that one right there. So just for context, this is a logarithmic graph. And that means every time you go up one level, you're not going from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and 3 to 4. You're going up by magnitude, an order of magnitude. You're going up by 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. And normally exponential functions would just be a straight line, right? That's how you take exponential functions and you make them comprehensible for human. But in this one, you'll notice it's also curved. That means it is a double exponential, okay? And that's what we're seeing in regards to the overall arc of history of human development and technology. And so we as humans have a really difficult time comprehending exponential curves or exponential growth, much less double exponential growth. And so there's this story. This is it. Thank you, Greg. This is perfect. There's a story that and it has different roots, and I'm not going to pretend to know all about it, but someone was owed kind of a favor, or they did something for their local king, and that king said, all right, I'll do something for you. What do you want? And they said, all I want you to do is give me one grain of rice and then double it on every square of a chessboard or a checkered board, whatever you want to call it. And at first the kid's like, all right, that's fine. I give you 1 grain of rice, then 2 grains of rice, 4 grains of rice, 8 grains of rice, et cetera, et cetera. And due to the exponential nature of mathematical, exponential growth, you don't even get to the end of the chessboard if you're doubling every time you move from one square to the next. You can only get to maybe halfway, and the individual, the receiving person, will have more grains of rice than all the grains of rice on the planet, And so you can see someone has done the work in here, right, for the mathematical calculations, right? And so we don't think in terms of exponential. We think of linear growth. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When in reality, it's 1 times 10 to the first power, 10 to the second power, 10 to the third power, right? So it's going up by orders of magnitude every single time. And that's hard for us to perceive. And what we're seeing is it's not just a matter of, computational power is going up exponentially. It's not just memory is going up exponentially. It's not just telecommunications is going up exponentially. It's all these trends are coming together to create double exponential curves. And all this is converging just like a rogue wave is converging to open seas, and you get these massive nonlinear effects that are from our wetware point of view are almost impossible to track, and thus almost impossible for us to conceive of the second and third order knock-on effects of what's happening on the knee of the curve of exponential growth. And so, Ray Kurzweil calls out the law of accelerating returns. My point with all this, and this is something Greg and I we try to come up with a theme around this, and it was be patient but hurry up. Meaning, learn about this stuff and understand it's going to take some time for us to learn. It's going to take some time for the technology to come around, but don't be complacent, because we're at the beginning of the knee of the curve, all right? And
especially if you're sitting at a desk job doing something,
right? Exactly. A very good point.
And
Absolutely.
you're relying on that only for your income. Like,
absolutely,
you should definitely be proactive in thinking about how you can, have another source of income.
Yeah, and whether it be your income or just your ability to live in general, right? And I think something you've pushed forth, Greg, is don't just get embedded in one thing, right? Have multiple abilities, capabilities to live your life. I think that's so important. And this is part of the competition that I was kind of referring to, is there are going to be other people who come along and they're going to eat your lunch, if we're not careful. And so make sure that, you kind of keep that in mind. Yes, be patient for the technology, but, don't be complacent. When it comes to this, and just understand that it's coming. This stuff is coming, and it will be a torrent of change. And we all need to be prepared, and hopefully be prepared to help each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the key, is hold on to your humanity and, see if you can help other people out as much as you can with, keep building your skills, keep finding other like-minded people. And it's going to be a torrent of change, that's for sure. And to be aware of it so that you can adapt and not just survive, but also thrive.
Yeah. Well, two other aspects that Greg and I talked about are, I think in many ways, we'll all have to be a little more entrepreneurial oriented, which requires high levels of self-accountability, right? Of being proactive, to learn new skills, to be creative, to find out where we could be replaced and how we move on to the next thing, and also how we offer value to the overall market. How do we offer value to each other? That's what entrepreneurs do. What's the next thing that I can do that offers value to others? One thing that I came up with, and this is just me personally, is while we're all loading for the next volley, right? Is property acquisition. And I don't mean property acquisition just in the sense of real estate, although that could be something important, but it could be anything. Whatever we as humans will need in order to survive in the future. And I say thrive, I don't survive. I don't mean like apocalyptically. I mean things that we have to have. Food, you talk about that, Greg, right? Farming, regenerative farming. I think that's a great example. And everyone knows my bias, right? Bitcoin. That will be the money of the future, and it will be the money of AI because it can be passed back and forth virtually, cyber. Get that property now, so that way you'll have it in the future, and ideally you can either live off of it, you can survive off it, or maybe even thrive off of it.
Yep. Yeah, things that you can have that you can provide value to others, and create abundance in your life. And once you've got all your basics taken care of, then once you start creating some abundance, you can start to bless other people with that abundance. So all right, Jay, man, we're coming up on a little over 2 hours here. Do you want to wrap up with anything else, or let people know where people can find you and follow you and support what you got going on?
I will say, Greg and I, we spent some time on this, and we're poking in the dark just as much as everyone else. So please don't take anything we say as gospel. We're just trying our personal best to try to be a service and to try to help people think about this in a different way. Even if the way that we're thinking about it is wrong, we're trying to get to inspire other people just to think about it, just to get out of your comfort zone. So as a great talk show host Todd Herman said, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that's probably the most important lesson they all have to learn in this.
Yeah.
For me, as you see in the captioning, I co-host a Bitcoin meetup with my good buddies Justin and Andy, and it is, go to meetup.com and look up Bitcoin, Huntsville, crypto, and coffee. And our missions to help people get comfortable with Bitcoin, understand what it is, how it works under the hood, and why it's so important, in my opinion, to the cause of individual liberty. We are actively trying to separate state and money, because that's the only way that we're going to get government out of our lives, is to get government out of money. And the moment we do that, we take politics out of the money game. And that's probably the most important thing that I'm looking at right now for my personal life mission, is to use Bitcoin as the ultimate freedom accelerator.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jay. It's always a pleasure getting to chat with you and
Likewise.
do these Truth Seeking Thursdays. Everybody, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it around with folks. That if you got, make sure that you got some value out of this and like the discussion. And we'll be back again for another Truth Seeking Thursday. Give us a week in between. We're doing them bi-weekly, so we'll check that out, and then be working on booking some guests for the channel for some one-on-one interviews. So stay tuned for that. Happy New Year, everybody, and we will catch you next time. Peace.
You good?